Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Naughty Autie in Conversation. Today, I'm joined by Eleanor. Hello.
Hello.
Eleanor is an autistic and ADHD teenager studying for her A-levels. She enjoys spending time with her 3 cats, listening to music, singing, and playing ukulele and piano. Eleanor has struggled with various mental health issues, including an eating disorder over the last few years, and in September 2020, her mother died from cancer. She is keen to share her experience as, until recently, undiagnosed neurodivergent person struggling with mental illness and navigating a journey of loss and grief. So I'm going to start, Eleanor, with the question I traditionally ask my guests first. How and when did you discover that you were autistic?
So I was only diagnosed in January, so not long ago at all, and ADHD at the same time. I have struggled with my mental health for a while now, since I was about 13, but I was first diagnosed with anorexia in 2017 when I was 14. And nothing about autism was even mentioned until I think one day in 2018, my doctor kind of, as a side comment, mentioned it to my mum. Oh, because some of those traits relate to autism, but we're all on the spectrum somewhere, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
And then it never went any further. And then at the beginning of 2020, I ended up with a consultant who used to be a specialist in neurodevelopmental conditions. She made me do a quote, and she said, I think it's worth getting an assessment. And at the start, when she said that, I was like, me, autistic? Like, what is this? I didn't really know anything. Then COVID, which kind of messed up the whole process, made it take a lot longer, and I became more acutely unwell, which meant that I couldn't have the assessment. So I didn't end up having it until January. And then, yeah, but for so long, like when it was first suggested to me, I was just so against it. I was like,
Really?
I think the wording that I sent in an email to my therapist, because I was looking at it the other day, was I don't have anything against people with autism, but I'm definitely not autistic.
Okay.
I think
Did
I
you
was
have
just
did you have a kind of stereotype internalized in your mind as to what being autistic?
yeah, I guess I did. Like, I didn't know any autistic people, so
You didn't have
I
anything.
don't really think I knew anything, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah.
So when did you come to embrace and accept it?
Well, before the process of having the assessment, I did a lot more research on the internet, looking at other people with autism on social media. And the more I looked at, the more I learned, the more I was interested, the more I related to these people. And then I guess I slowly came round to the idea and thought, this is not a bad thing. This
Yeah.
is cool. And like, if it helps me understand myself, then that's amazing. And so by the time I had the assessment, I was more engaged in it, and actually felt like a relief, I guess, when I did get the diagnosis.
Yeah. And you're a proud Autie now?
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Okay, so can we talk about your struggles with having an eating disorder? What's your earliest recollection of this experience?
So I've always been like quite perfectionistic, and liking things a certain way, which now I know is related to me being autistic. I didn't know that before, but and I think when I was just starting secondary school, I was a dancer. I danced a lot, so there was quite a focus for me on like being healthy, eating healthily, and remaining like that. But I used to I allowed myself to eat what I wanted most of the time. I'd just be quite particular about it. And then when I was 14, at the beginning of year 10, I started at a full-time performing arts school as a boarder.
Yeah.
And I think within 2 weeks, I was just very unhappy.
Okay.
I didn't really have any friends. I didn't know what I was doing. And almost overnight, my head, I remember I was just sitting in my room and I just randomly thought, you know what would be a great idea is if I just stop eating. And I don't think there was any conscious, like in hindsight, I can think that that was related to I was very lonely. I
Yeah.
wasn't feeling like I was being seen at the time. I didn't have any sort of insight into that. I just thought this would be a good thing to do,
Yeah.
and it was
Look,
almost overnight.
sure. Looking back, do you think being undiagnosed autistic in, you know, an environment in which you weren't understood had a lot to do with it?
Yeah, I think so. I think I when I started this school, I'd gone from being the person who was like the person who loved performing arts at my old school to being one of many in a sea of many. And I found it really difficult to make friends. I felt like I was a different person with everyone. So
Right.
I was masking like heavily and but differently with different groups of people. So I was a different person depending on who I was with. So I kind of lost my sense of identity. I was like, I don't know who I am anymore, um, which was really hard. And because it's a boarding school, you don't really get any time off. I really appreciated before going home and just like collapsing, kind of like sitting, watching something and not having to put up any sort of pretense. But when you're at boarding school, you don't have that. You're just constantly in
Yeah.
that environment. And I don't think that was very good for me.
Oh, so you didn't have anywhere to escape to
Yeah,
decompress. Yeah.
yeah.
So at which point did this begin to really spiral out of control such that your life was being significantly impacted? And perhaps at which point did other people begin to notice signs of what you were going through?
So because I was at boarding school, it was harder for people to notice. But I think my parents first realized because of my thinking is so black and white, it was almost overnight. I went from being okay to very much not very quickly. It wasn't very gradual. Um, and when I came home from half term, my parents realized, okay, something is not right here. So I went to the GP. They sent me to the GP at a performing arts school associated with the school. And I'm very angry about this looking back, actually, because she just sent me for a blood test and an ECG and said, your weight's not that low, you'll be fine. And looking back, I'm very angry about that because
With
I
me.
do think a lot what would have happened if she'd have referred me then. Because then I just struggled because essentially to my head, that was her saying, you're not sick enough, you need to get worse and then we'll help
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
So I did. I just kept going. And then when I came home for Christmas, I was much more unwell. My parents took me to my home GP, and my home GP said, why the hell did they not refer you sooner? And then I got referred to the local CAMS. And I ended up leaving that boarding school because it was just not doing good for me. So
Yeah. When you left the boarding school, did you notice any improvements, or did things continue to get worse?
well, when I left, I went back to the school I was at before, but I had to go part-time because I was too unwell to be there all the time. So I was a bit disconnected in that way, but I was very caught up in my illness at that point. So I don't think I was very much engaged in
No.
anything externally.
Sure. How did this affect your performing arts? Is it something you put on the back burner for a while? Because, for example, I'm a musician myself, and I know that when I'm feeling very low, I detach from the things that kind of provide me with emotional sustenance and, you know, meaning. So
Yeah,
is it something
definitely.
that you withdrew further into? Like, did you immerse yourself more in performing arts, or did you detach from it?
So when I was at performing arts school, I was very adamant that this is what I wanted to do with my life, that I
Yeah.
wanted to go and do musical theatre. Um, but when I left, I was so caught up in my illness that I don't think I really had space for anything else. And I wasn't allowed to dance because I wasn't physically well enough. And I just kind of retreated into myself. I didn't really engage with any of it for a while. Um, and then as I started weight restoring that first time, and I was allowed to get back into dance, I was excited. I did get gradually more excited about it.
Mm.
And then I started enjoying it again. But I think over that year, I don't have a specific time. I just kind of realized that I this is something I really love, but I don't think it would be good for me to do this as my career. I want to do something else. So that's where I'm at now. I just do it for enjoyment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I've seen some of your singing on social media, and you're a terrific singer, I've got to say.
Thank you.
So earlier you touched on how your perfectionistic nature may be related to all of this, and perhaps it is in alignment with that autistic need for order. Now, I suppose I'm trying to draw parallels here. So other areas in which you apply, you know, perfectionism, that could be your, like, if I'm writing something, I'll go over it again and again and again until I can just never stop, because it will never ever ever meet my standard of perfection. Is it the same as someone who is perfectionistic about their craft, except you apply it to your body image? Is it
Kind of. I'm perfectionistic in lots of other ways too. My handwriting is one example. My handwriting is very ordered to the point where I get quite distressed if it's not, and I use a laptop in exams because it's too slow. Um, and yeah, I guess that did just transfer over to maladaptive um, coping strategies. So I got very obsessed with numbers. My eating disorder is like very focused on specific numbers
Mm,
to do with food and weight, and that became quite a big
yeah,
focus.
right,
Yeah, so it was just another manifestation, but of my perfectionism, but in a maladaptive way.
sure, okay. What are some common misconceptions about eating disorders?
I think the first one, which came up earlier when I was talking about my first GP visit, is that eating disorders are just to do with weight,
Right.
which is not true. Um, the way I explain it is that the physical side effects are a symptom. They're
Mm,
not the
root cause.
root cause. And so often eating disorders are actually not about the food, which seems crazy because it's in the name, right? But it's essentially a coping strategy like other maladaptive coping strategies like alcoholism or drug misuse or self-harm that people use to cope with difficult things in their lives. So trauma or loneliness, or often actually if people are neurodivergent and they're having a hard time
Yeah,
navigating the world. Um, and so it's not actually about the food, it's not actually about the weight, and it's not about the sandwich, even though so often it's easier to put it on the sandwich because it's easier to say, I don't want to eat this sandwich, I'm scared of gaining weight, than to say, I'm scared of being in the world and I don't know what I'm going to do, because it's easier to just focus on that one small thing
sure,
than to make it really big.
of course.
Um, I think other misconceptions is that, oh yeah, when people are, so if people are if people are weight restored, if they gain weight back, then it means they are mentally better. Often it's a long process of therapy that lasts a lot longer than the physical. restoration. Also that there's only one type of eating disorder. There's multiple different types. So there's anorexia, which is what I have. There's bulimia, binge eating disorder, something called ARFID, which is avoidant restricted food intake disorder. And there's other non-specified eating disorders too. So there's not just one type, there's and it affects everyone.
And I suppose they all have different drivers. It's a bit like when I talk about different drivers for demand avoidance. It's not just one. You know,
Yeah.
perhaps for some people, it could be exclusively about body image, whilst for others, it's more about establishing order and control, whilst others, it's more about euphoria and
yeah, exactly.
dysphoria.
It's so different for everyone. There's no one clear root cause that can be kind of, you know, generalized. It's all different. Which is why individualized treatment is so important, because it's definitely not one size fits all.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I suppose so many people have such a simplistic interpretation of, oh, it's just people who don't want to get fat or something like that. You know,
yeah.
Couldn't be further from the truth. Okay, so can you remind me when your mum died?
So she died in September last year.
Yeah, of cancer, wasn't it?
Yes, from cancer. She had a bout of breast cancer back in 2018.
Okay.
Had chemo and surgery and went into remission, and then it came back. She was diagnosed in April 2020, and then it was stage 4, so it spread to other areas. And yeah, things got rapidly worse during the summer, and she died in September.
Okay. And how did your mother's passing interact with your eating disorder?
So at the time, I was in full-time treatment. Actually, I was like in day patient treatment, so like a hospital, but you go home to sleep 5 days a week, which I think I was so grateful for. Really, like, kept me afloat. Everyone there, all the other patients and staff were incredible at kind of keeping me going. I don't know how I would have coped without it. I don't really actually remember that much about that time. Like, I think I blocked it out a lot in my memory. I think in a way it didn't actually, like, I think the worry was that it would make me worse, that I would turn to the food and the maladaptive coping strategies to cope. I think I didn't, because I was just too shell-shocked to even do that. I think I just kept doing what other people around me were telling me to do. So I would sit at treatment, they'd put a sandwich in front of me, and I almost didn't have the energy or the mental capacity to fight. I just did it. Which is why I think the fact that I had such a good support network was very important. But yeah, I don't remember that much about it.
Sure. Okay. How did you how have you coped? Like, what? It's a difficult question for me to ask, I suppose, but yeah, like, what have you done in order to process? How have you processed the bereavement, I suppose?
So it's been, I think it's something you can't force. It's very different for everyone, grief, and it's been more of a gradual thing. Like, I think so often I get caught up in the, I should be feeling this way, I should be sadder, I should be crying, which isn't helpful, because you can't really force yourself to feel a certain way. You can try, you can sit and watch sad videos and try and make yourself cry, which I have done before, but it's not very genuine. I think.
But I was just going to say, this is something that I've heard other autistics speak about, how when they are going through a bereavement, they notice, oh wow, okay, this is yet another area in which being autistic sets me apart from other people, because other people have, well, we expect people to grieve in a very specific way, but then it's like, well, no, in these situations I'm processing this completely differently to everyone else. And then
Yeah,
maybe there's a
definitely.
sense of, I mean, I don't want to be presumptuous, but is there a sense of, I should be I should be doing something more. I should be feeling something more. I should be, um, expressing myself in a different way to the way I'm expressing myself. Is there a sense of that?
Yeah, definitely. And it leads to guilt as well, which makes it worse because it's almost like a part of me, and when I've spoken to other people I know, is saying, did you really care? If you're not like feeling the way that you should feel, did you really care? And obviously, when these things happen, a lot of people saying, I'm so sorry for your loss. They're like coddling you, they're expecting you to be really broken. And so if you're not, if I'm having an okay day, it just reinforces it in my head. I'm like, they're expecting me to feel this way. I should be feeling this way. Why am I not?
Yeah,
Like, what's wrong with me? So I think I still struggle with that sometimes, but I think something that's very important to me has been the support, treatment support, and the support of friends and family.
yeah,
And there's a quote that I like to say to myself a lot, it's just, there's no should in feeling.
right,
You can't make yourself feel a certain way.
yeah,
And I know that I cared about my mum, and everyone who matters knows that as well. So I don't need to prove that, even though sometimes I feel like I do.
of course, of course. Um, do you have conversations with her still, like in your head or out loud?
I've written letters and talked about them in therapy. Um, Sometimes I think the difficult bits is when I will find something out about a friend. Like, for example, a few weeks ago, I met someone who then I found out was mates with one of my favorite music artists, who mum liked as well. And I just thought, oh, I need to tell her. And then I had a moment of, oh, I can't tell her. That sort of thing happens sometimes, which is difficult. Um, but yeah, I do a lot of journaling. So I'll write down anything that I need to like get out of my head, and that really, really helps. I think it helps me um, like make my thoughts feel more ordered, because I struggle when things are more like messy as such.
Bless you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like as in if I feel like it's just a big kind of cloud of different thoughts and emotions, I struggle with that. So I like ordering it. That's why journaling helps me. And sometimes I can address it as if I was speaking to someone. So yeah, I have written letters to mum as an example.
Yeah. When she was alive, was she someone you would confide in regularly?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think something also that was hard is that obviously she died in September, and I wasn't diagnosed as autistic and ADHD until January. And that was something that I really wanted to be able to tell her and
Yeah.
talk to her about,
Yeah.
because I feel like it's such a big thing. And it's just sad that I never got to kind of have that conversation with her.
I can imagine. I can imagine. That's something so significant. It's revelatory, isn't it? So it's like, wow, God, you want to discuss things like that with people you trust
Yeah.
and are very close to. I can understand.
Even through the diagnostic process, obviously they ask a lot of questions about what you were like when you were a child.
Mm,
And there was a lot of questions that my dad struggled to answer because he was working. Not that he wasn't engaged, he was very engaged, but my mum was very often the main caregiver. And so obviously those questions were sort of difficult to answer. And that was kind of another reminder of something that has been lost, I guess.
I suppose. Um, were your parents together when your mum died?
Yeah.
Yeah. So And do you have siblings?
I've got one brother, yeah.
Right. Do you speak about it with each other?
Sometimes. Uh, yeah, we don't like sit down and have conversations about it. It's more like little comments, like if something happens, we'll go, "Oh, mum used to do that," or "Mum used to say that."
Hmm.
Um, I guess that's kind of developed more with time. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, of course. So on TikTok, you openly use humor as a way of dealing with or addressing the bereavement.
Yeah.
What kind of reception do you get from these posts? I enjoy.
Um,
I just want to say I think it's
yeah.
really clever. I think it's like I remember watching one thinking, wow, that's quite genius. That's a fantastic way for an autistic person to process this kind of thing. I think so. I'm totally on board with it.
Yeah, I think I it is, well, number one, it's just a part, it's just kind of a distraction and something I like doing. But number two, I think it can be seen as avoidance, which is then when people are a bit kind of against it because they're saying, are you just using this as an opportunity to just not think about it and not engage with the emotions, which I don't think I am, because I do talk about the icky stuff. I have therapy, I cry, I talk about it.
You're not making a mockery of it.
I'm not making a mockery of it, no. And yeah, I think honestly, the main thing I want to say is when people get kind of criticize me for it, I just want to say it's not that deep. Like, it's literally, it doesn't mean that much. It's just a bit of fun. And
It's none of their bloody business as well.
yeah,
This is your bereavement. It's your
to be
grief,
honest, yeah.
and it's a public. It's your platform. It's like scroll on.
Yeah, and I know like that there obviously there is certain things that I would not talk about slash joke about, but I think I am kind of aware of that line and able to kind of enforce it myself. I don't need anyone else to do it for me.
Yeah, yeah, okay, absolutely, absolutely. Um, do you think your mum was neurodivergent?
I don't think so. I think my dad is.
Right. Yeah. um, yeah. So, when did you start playing the piano and ukulele and start singing?
So I started playing the piano. I had a year of lessons when I was, I think, in year 9. But I didn't really enjoy the lessons. I prefer just like teaching myself and learning songs that I like. So my technique is not very good. I just like playing songs that I like to play and singing
Yeah,
with them. Um,
I'm exactly the same.
I think if a proper pianist were to watch me, they probably would cringe quite a lot. But whatever. I enjoy
Yeah,
it.
I literally have the same conversations with myself in my head because I think I can pull it off. I can pull it off because I can play. I can just figure out the basic chords to some songs and think, I think I kind of look good to
Yeah.
the untrained mind. But if an actual pianist saw me, they'd say, "Harry, what
Mm,
the hell are you doing?" No, so I get that.
definitely. Yeah, I've been having singing lessons since year 7, so since I was 11. Um, I'm currently working towards doing my musical theatre singing diploma, which is the one after grade 8. Yeah, I love musical theatre, um, and yeah, and the ukulele. I don't really know. I remember I in primary school. I had the classic thing of like little tiny soprano ukuleles and the little kids play it and it's really screechy and annoying when you're like 8 years old. Yeah, I did that. Um, and then when I was a bit older, I just kind of thought, oh, maybe I should like try and get back into that, but like actually do it a bit more properly.
Yeah.
Um, so I did, and I recently, for my 18th birthday, which was in April, I got a baritone ukulele, which is like the biggest type of ukulele you can get, and it's tuned slightly differently. It's like the bottom 4 strings of a guitar.
Mm.
Um, and I love that. I've been playing that a lot. It's just, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, awesome. Because I've not played that, so it's almost like a bass ukulele.
Yeah, really, it's like It
Not,
sounds more richer than other
yeah,
ukuleles, more like halfway between a ukulele and a guitar.
yeah, awesome, awesome stuff. Do you compose?
A bit. I've written 3 songs. Um, yeah, 2 on piano, 1 on ukulele.
Okay, awesome. And how does music help?
Um,
If it does, or
well,
is it separate?
I don't think it is separate. I think it's all intertwined, but music has always been like a big part of my life in well, in dance and in playing myself. I think it can be a comfort. Also, like sometimes I need to cry. I've got a really great sad crying playlist. I think sometimes that's you really need that.
Yeah,
And then I've also got just like more vibey playlists for if I'm on the train and I want to like kind of bop along to it. Um, so yeah, I think it's a really good
stim.
distraction or also way to engage with my feelings. And it's just fun, really. And also it's a way to engage with other people because you can discuss it. People who are fans of the same sort of music, the same artist. So it's a really good way of engaging, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's like a stim, you know, uh,
Yeah.
in the same way grabbing one of these things is, you know, it's just very, it helps regulate a lot. So yeah, absolutely. Um, what are some of your aspirations? Like, is there like, are you gonna, do you want to go to uni? Is there something, are you going to study something in particular with the hope of
Yeah.
getting a,
So I missed quite a lot of I'd missed quite a lot of school over the last few years because of my illness, but I'm getting back into it now, and I'm doing my A levels, yeah, biology, chemistry, psychology. I did want to do medicine. I still might. It kind of depends on what my mock grades are, which I'm taking next week, actually. Scary. And if not, then I'd like to do another sciencey subject and maybe do postgrad medicine. I don't know. I think at the moment I'm just going to do something I like. So I like the idea of doing neuroscience. That sounds cool. Um, yeah.
yeah, awesome. What attracts you to those fields, like medicine? And I think you said you said on TikTok to be a child and adolescent psychiatrist.
Yeah, like if I did do medicine, there's a couple of areas which like really interest me, which is yeah, psychiatry. I think that's just due to my personal experience and of things that have been
Yeah.
helpful and unhelpful, and wanting to kind of, well, the system, the like CAMS system, and the whole mental health system, to be honest, in the
Yeah.
NHS is just fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
So if I can do anything to try and help it, that would be amazing. The other area is emergency medicine. I
Okay.
think that's really cool, just like A&E. I just quite like the I like the like rapid pace of it. I think it's quite cool.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I suppose an adrenaline rush.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I've always liked science, and I just like understand. I think it is part of my need to understand things and understand the world, and um, I like learning, and I
Yeah.
like knowledge, and I like, yeah, I think it's interesting.
Awesome. Nice stuff. What else was I going to ask? What are your special interests?
So it changes a lot, but I think, well, I would say music in general, but especially at the moment, I'm really enjoying writing. I love Orla Gartland. She's like a singer-songwriter, artist. Love her. Um, yeah, medicine slash like medical sciences,
Yeah,
big one.
absolutely.
And yeah, also I think psychopathology, which is just like abnormal psychology. Because of my own experiences with it, I've kind of got a bit stuck into it, and things like I read the whole DSM, which some
Oh,
people would
wow.
say is a bit strange, but I found it so interesting.
That's very autistic. Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's the thing. Yeah, I've got my own personal DSM as well, and it is really interesting.
it is really cool.
So so that's interesting. So you may aspire to be a child and adolescent psychiatrist, but so because obviously in my personal experience, I found that working with psychiatrists is incredibly exhausting. Psychologists are of a completely different breed, and I often gel very well with them when I'm discussing perhaps the social model, and then psychiatrists are approaching it from a slightly different vantage point. So, is would you aspire to kind of change the system from the inside? You know, so do you because I listened to your Asperger's video series, and that was very informative. So yeah, a medical role, but do you subscribe to the social model of disability? Like
I think I need to learn more about it, to be honest, but
okay.
I'd like to. I do think there's a lot of problems with the mental health system, and I think that especially I know so many girls around my age, a bit younger, who have more recently been diagnosed as autistic or with ADHD, and have had eating disorders or other mental health issues and have been misdiagnosed with BPD, actually. It's
Right.
so common,
Yes, very common.
which is sad. So I think definitely needs to be more focus on that, especially with eating disorders, just because of the amount of correlation.
Mm.
I think it's something to be very important to be aware of, and that's an area that I find quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost something my brain jumps to every single time when people I know or people I've heard of are speaking about their struggles with depression, anxiety, eating disorders. I can't help but feel, I strongly suspect that you're neurodivergent and don't know it yet. Yeah. But yeah, as you just said, so many of these people are incorrectly diagnosed with cluster B personality disorders. So
Yeah.
there's a hell of a
And
lot.
then the treatment of people with cluster B personality disorders is in the system. They're so heavily stigmatized that it can be very harmful, especially for autistic people. Just because of
Absolutely.
the stigma around cluster B personality disorders, especially BPD, the idea that they're attention seeking
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's the thing. I prefer to say starved of acknowledgement, or at least can we destigmatize the term attention seeking? You know,
yeah,
it's
definitely.
coming from this deep-seated need for connection and acknowledgement, and no one has ever seen me, no one has ever understood me. So that can manifest as a slightly more desperate attempt to plug people into them, but that's not
Yeah.
stigmatized at all.
Yeah, attention seeking so often used as a bad word or
Sure.
as like a insult as such, but I guess in some ways it probably can be more shallow slash surface level, but I don't think it should ever be punished, especially if the way that someone is seeking attention is through hurting themselves, essentially.
Exactly.
That's a concern. That's not something to be told off about. Like if someone's going to those extremes to
Mm,
get attention, to be seen, to be heard, then that's a worry. And what they need is support, not to be
exactly.
told off.
And this is something that infuriates me about people who are of the opinion that two types of self-harm. Some people do it for genuine reasons. Other people are doing it for attention. People doing it for attention should be ashamed of themselves. And it's like, yeah, seriously, if someone is going to that length in order
Yeah.
to seize attention from their surroundings, then there's something dark and sinister and sad going on that we have to be attentive to. Yeah, I was going to say earlier, when we were talking about cluster B personality disorders and misdiagnosis, infuriating. This I find this infuriating. Infuriatingly, the moment a person, perhaps incorrectly or misdiagnosed as BPD, finally has their autism acknowledged, they get discharged from the mental health services as if to say, like, yeah, the two apparently aren't, you know, mutually compatible. So yeah, there's a lot to fix.
Mm. Yeah, I'm lucky that I've had good experiences more recently in the mental health services. And the thing that I did very much notice though is that it was suggested a couple times that by psychiatrists that I might have BPD or symptoms of it, but I wasn't 18 yet, so it wasn't going to be fully diagnosed. And then as soon as I got my autism diagnosis, that went out the window, and the way I was being treated weirdly changed.
Yeah.
Which just really made me think, oh my goodness, the way people with BPD or BPD symptoms are treated in mental health services versus how much that has clearly changed now. Yeah, it just blew my mind.
Yeah, this is where I view a heavy focus on behavioral presentation as problematic, in that, yeah, two people can manifest precisely the same behavior, but it's coming from completely different places. And that isn't to say that I don't think people have BPD. I think BPD is very much a genuine phenomenon, but it gets very complicated when we think about context, and it gets very complicated when we think about a person in the wrong place who's never had their needs met, who is in that situation resorting to certain behaviors in order to secure some kind of control and perhaps attention, destigmatized attention, yeah, could look like BPD in that situation, so yeah, thoroughness in assessment is bloody important when it comes to people being
Yeah.
directed towards the right kind of support. Okay, so a couple of people here have some questions, if that's okay with you, Eleanor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Someone said, presumably treatment is, or I don't know if I understand this question, William. Presumably treatment is or could be another area of control or invasion. Oh, you mean, oh, well, actually, I often speak about that in the context of PDA, if you think of what I'm talking about, how, yes, it could be regarded as invasive or even gaslighting in a way, or someone attempting to, as in one could experience, hey, no, back off, you're not going to make me feel better, you have an agenda here, you're on my side, and even still, is that what you mean in a PDA way, William? Because I suppose the individual has to consent and has to be prepared to, improve, get better, and all the rest of it. So, which renders therapy either really good idea or perhaps not the best idea for someone who's not ready to receive treatment. I could be wrong though. But anyway, Eleanor, you're saying now that what kind of therapy do you have, if you don't mind me asking? And is it?
So I have one-to-one therapy every week, which is just like integrative therapy. So it draws on different kind of modalities. I also still do attend day patient treatment a couple of days a week now, and I go to school the other days. And the people at this treatment center know me very well. They know me for a while, so it works quite well, and it's very much coming alongside rather than telling you what to do.
Right.
When I had my first experience with CAMS, the
Mm.
CAMS approach to treating eating disorders, anorexia specifically, is that your parents take all of the control, they do everything, they tell you, you must eat this, 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 if not, you sit at the table the whole day. That was bad
Oh,
for me. That is the evidence-based treatment throughout the whole thing. It ruined my relationship with my parents. It made me very angry, very upset all the time. In the end, it worked, but it only worked because I was so upset and angry. I just didn't want to have to deal with it anymore. And I thought the only way out of this is just if I do it, it's just if I eat and do what they tell me to do.
oh,
Yeah, and I ended up, I mean, clearly it didn't work long term because I ended up relapsing, but
oh my gosh.
yeah.
Cams, cams, cams. People watching, what are we going to do about cams? I, I'm running out of options. I'm running out
Yeah,
of ideas. I think I need a trigger warning now when people say cams. They just never seem
yeah.
to amaze me. Once again, cams prove themselves inefficient, incompetent, ridiculous.
I think it just needs to be way more individualized. The thing that annoys me about CAMS is that it's definitely very much one size fits all. It's like you have an eating disorder, we do family-based therapy. That's what it's called. And if that doesn't work, you do CBT. It's not like, what are your individual strengths and weaknesses? How does this work? It's just, this is what you have, this is what you do.
I can't actually cope with CAMS. I'm going to need help. I'm going to need therapy after this, I think, to cope with these CAMS.
But CAMS, there
Yeah.
are some good experiences though. If this makes you feel better, I had a better experience more recently with CAMS. There's a team in my area called the Home Treatment Team, which is relatively new. And they, at one point, were able to visit me twice a day, and then once a day to keep me out of hospital, which was amazing. And they were all amazing. So that is my very good experience in CAMS. I am very grateful for that.
Okay. I'm not giving CAMS that credit. I'm giving the individuals working with you that credit, I think.
Okay.
Someone asks, do you study much neuroscience so far? If so, do you find it helps you understand yourself?
I've done some within my psychology A level, a bit of biopsychology. I find it very interesting. I think it's so much a balance between the kind of social, behavioral, cognitive, and biological approaches, because we study in the A level like a lot of the different approaches, but I don't think one can explain all of it. Like, I don't like the idea that my depression is caused just by me having not enough serotonin.
Yes.
I don't think it's that. I mean, maybe that's a part of it.
Yeah.
But I think it's so much more integrative than that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone says, my 12-year-old used to love dancing, attending various styles of dance for 4 days a week. However, as soon as she started secondary school, this all stopped. She is school refusing, stays in bed all day, has no motivation, and really has gone into her own world. Any advice? She's always been anxious, an anxious little thing, but this has almost exploded tenfold. Oh yeah, that's really, really difficult. I suppose, Karen, in these situations, I often encourage people to consider the place that the child is currently in. So we have to be mindful as to not direct all of our energies to, let's try and find out how we can get them to do X, Y, and Z. Instead, right now, she's school refusing, she's in bed, that's where she is. So the ideal person and the ideal way that this person can help in this situation is to initially accept and validate that right now, this is all she can manage. And that's okay, because she doesn't trust people. And the world is overwhelming and scary. The world is a place in which we get burnt and stung and hurt. So yeah, let's not worry about the world right now. Let's worry about where she is at. Right now, that's where she is. So progress comes later. First and foremost, we have to help her to regain trust in other people and the world, and understand that, yeah, not every adult is here to try and get me to do X, Y, and Z. That's where I'd start off. And eventually, once she has got that trust and she regards the world as a slightly safer place than she does now, then we can think about what we can do next. Cassandra Davis, do you find that, this is for you, Eleanor, do you find that your perfectionism has led to you putting very high expectations on yourself academically? How do you manage that as an autistic ADHD person?
So I never really had to work very hard in primary school and up till about year 10-ish before my GCSEs, because I was naturally clever. I didn't really ever have to do revision. I didn't really know what the word revision meant. I just did well without really trying, which meant that when I had to revise my GCSEs, it was a bit of a shell shock. I was like, I can't just do well without actually trying. I didn't do as much revision as my friends. I was quite panicked about it, and I spent way too much time organizing my notes than actually learning. I made all these flashcards for sciences, and they weren't actually that helpful. But once I'd started them, I had to finish them because I had to have a full set.
So the perfectionism was applied to the organization as opposed to the actual academic.
It was applied to both, but the organization kind of took over, which then just made me very distressed and anxious, because I was like, I can't not do this, but now I'm going to do badly. I didn't end up doing badly. Very luckily, I managed to
Yeah.
get through it anyway. But I think because I missed quite a lot of school, then I had to self-teach a bit of the GCSEs as well. So I did find strategies. I found it difficult when I got one GCSE that was a lower grade than the rest of them.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I guess I just found a way to cope with it. Yeah. I'm having to come to terms with the fact that I'm not going to be able to do as well as I would have done had I not missed some school in my A levels. So that was an ongoing process. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Jude Langridge. I'm sorry I missed the first half, so you may have already covered this. My daughter is 15, she's PDA and has been in burnout for over 2 years. She really struggles with food and how her levels of anxiety impacts it. How did you find the return to education and the impact on your physical and mental health and anxieties?
So for me, it's been very gradual. I didn't do any online school during COVID because I was just doing treatment. And school has been a very kind of up and down thing for me. I think it's just been very important to do it gradually and for people to listen to me, not being forced into it, because being forced into it would just make everything worse. So it's been very much a mutual agreement of I'm going to do 1 day a week and then waiting until I say, with some gentle encouragement, gentle, like, how about we think about doing another day rather than you must do another day. And then waiting until I say, I think I'm ready to do another day. And funnily enough, it did work because recently I said, oh, I want to try and do a lunch at school. And because that came from me, it was easier. But I've also got more support at school. I can go to the medical centre. I've got like a timeout card if I need to.
Okay.
So knowing I've got a way out, even though I don't really use it, I guess just having it there
Sure.
is helpful. Yeah, having people to offload to as well. I think it's important.
Sure. I was going to ask earlier as well, like, what's your relationship like with food now? Like, can you enjoy food now? Is there always going to be some trepidation? Yeah, what's it like when you're going out for a meal with people, for example?
I'm like still in the process of recovery. Over the last 3-4 years, I've had multiple, it's been like a roller coaster really. Like I've got better, I've relapsed, I've got better, I've relapsed. So I am on the way up again now, tentatively. And I really hope that full recovery is possible. I have spoken to people who say they are fully recovered and that they have a completely normal relationship with food. I just think it takes a long time. So yeah, just got to keep working on it, I guess. I am able though to do a lot more now than I could have done a year ago or even a few months ago. Like we went on a trip to London the weekend and I was able to go out for meals with my family and enjoy it, which was nice. There was some anxiety, but I think if you'd have told me a few months ago that that would be something I'd be able to do, I would have just laughed at you. So yeah.
Okay, wonderful, good for you. Sorry, team, is BPD bipolar or borderline or something else? BPD stands for borderline personality disorder. It's a cluster B personality disorder. Yeah, characterized by chronic inner emptiness, impulsivity, unstable relationships, and a desperate need to avoid abandonment. Frequently, people who are neurodivergent and autistic are misdiagnosed. As I said before, that isn't to say co-occurrence doesn't occur, but yeah, it's very important that we recognize the underlying neurodivergence in order for the person to get the support they need. That is very important, especially for our young female beings. Would you be happy to say a bit more about the nuances of how you were treated? I can't remember. This comment was made 12 minutes ago. So Julia, can you just remind us what you mean exactly and provide some context to your question? Okay, let's see. Other questions, scrolling. Okay, general question. Would you say that there is trauma experienced from either not being diagnosed and having to live in a world that is not understanding, or being diagnosed and inappropriate therapies / approaches being used? If so, do you think that BPD can be a result of the trauma and therefore ends up in the mix of diagnosis? Not necessarily with BPD specifically, because personality disorders tend to set in the formative years. But saying that, personality disorders are these days being more recognized as complex forms of complex PTSD, which set in very early on as, you know, our identity and personality is forming. So, but I'm positive that yes, both of those things would induce trauma. Do you have anything to
Yeah,
say?
there's so much developmental trauma. It's definitely a thing from growing up as an undiagnosed neurodivergent person in a world that's not really made for neurodivergent people. Definitely. People think the word trauma is reserved for big, massive events like, I don't know, being a soldier or being abused or something. But
Yeah,
those sorts of developmental traumas are very, very valid as well.
absolutely, absolutely. And I find that people gatekeep trauma. Trauma has nothing to do with the event, actually, because people can be subjected to the same event and not all emerge traumatized. It's very much a matter of the individual's relationship to the event. And yeah, that's the thing. Immediately, we can't challenge a person's trauma in the sense of, oh, come on, that's not even that bad. You know, and as neurodivergent people, we are so accustomed to invalidation of varying degrees. You know, this is something that I really try and hammer home. It's not just the people who are, trigger warning, I'm getting better at this, sexually assaulted or bullied or beaten up, although these things obviously are very serious, and people who have been subjected to them need help, compassion and support. But in subtler ways too, just being neurodivergent in a world that doesn't understand you, and every single day you have these kind of mild forms of disapproval and, you know, rejection, and people finding you odd and people looking at you funny, that can give you a complex. It can build up and up and up and up. And if you grow up with that constantly, people not quite knowing who you are, it's going to be destabilizing later on in life. But then it can be confusing going to therapy saying, oh yeah, I'm not really sure, because you're looking for a great big traumatic event to tell a therapist and to tell other people, because you feel that you need to inflate it in order to, you know, justify it. But no, seriously, trauma is about your relationship to any event. It doesn't matter. So yeah, suspected BPD versus autistic diagnosis and how Eleanor noticed being treated differently by professionals. Oh, that's what you meant, how you were treated. Because you said, oh, they suddenly treated you differently the moment your being autistic was recognized.
Yeah. So I think when I was, before I was diagnosed as autistic, the way that it was just certain people, I think the general vibe was more of, you're too attached to people and that's bad. We need to avoid dependency. We need to avoid you kind of engaging too much with support systems and relying on them. And sometimes it felt like I was being pushed out of treatment. I still feel like that sometimes now, but I think that's more of my own fears of abandonment rather than reality.
Sure.
And when I got my diagnosis, everything went a lot slower. I had this big meeting called CTR, and it felt like it was a much more slower process of people actually appreciating how the treatment was helping me and how the dependency is not necessarily always a bad thing, and more actually thinking about how having a safe place and how things like that help, rather than just being like attachment equals bad.
Sure.
Which I think could have been quite harmful. And yeah, definitely things going a lot slower
Yeah.
now, and actually, which is very helpful because I don't deal well with things being taken away from me very quickly or something.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Specific question, Eleanor. Do you still dislike the term Asperger's? Because I feel many now have positively identified with the term Asperger's. I'm asking based on the TikTok you did, and I could have sworn that TikTok was only about 10 days ago or something. So if I should imagine you still dislike the term, otherwise what the heck happened in that 10 days?
10 days, yeah. No, I don't like the term. I on my diagnostic report it says, well, on one of them it says DSM, autism spectrum disorder, otherwise known as Asperger's in the ICD. And the other one it just says Asperger's, but I don't like identifying with that term because of its relation to Hans Asperger and how I went down that whole rabbit hole of learning about that. I'm not a fan.
Yeah. Yeah, we both have content related to this, so yeah, check it out by all means. Awesome. So yeah, that's it for the questions. Eleanor, thank you so much for being so candid and open and transparent and vulnerable today. That was a really valuable contribution to the Naughty Autie series. So thank
Thank
you.
you for having me.
No, seriously, it's our absolute pleasure. And yet, thank you everyone else who tuned in today to watch and listen to Eleanor. I hope that you've gained some insight. Yeah, and you can check Eleanor out on let's see, Instagram and TikTok at hello.eleanor, and Instagram at saving Eleanor. Yeah, there we go. She's got really good, informative, funny, musical content. So yeah, I'm sure you'll be entertained and educated. So cool. Thank you everyone, and I'll see you next week.